In the misty dawn of a forgotten South Carolina swamp, where ancient oaks drip with the tears of the damned, a plantation stood silent, no whips cracked, no hounds bayed, no slaves fled. But why? Unearthed papers whisper of a hellish pact with guilt and God, where escape meant facing not man, but eternal judgment. Dare you uncover the sin that chained their souls? The fog clung to the Ashley River like a shroud, thick and unyielding, as if the water itself mourned the secrets buried in its banks. It was 1797, a year when the young American Republic still echoed with the cries of revolution, yet in the shadowed heart of South Carolina, a different kind of tyranny was taking root. Thomas Vance stepped off the dusty coach from Maryland, his boots sinking into the red clay earth that smelled of damp decay and untamed wilderness. He was a man of middling height, his face etched with the premature lines of one who had stared too long into the abyss of human suffering. His eyes, sharp and unblinking like a predator's, scanned the horizon, not for opportunity, but for isolation. Vance carried no Bible in his satchel, though his mind was a cathedral of twisted theology, where efficiency masqueraded as divine order, and control was the ultimate sacrament. The air hummed with the incessant drone of insects, a symphony of life indifferent to the horrors men wrought. Vance's letters to his brother, yellowed with age and stained by the sweat of confession, revealed a soul grappling with the original sin of ambition. "Brother," he wrote in ink that bled like wounds, "the plantations of our forebears are altars to inefficiency, where the blood of discipline flows endlessly, yet yields no lasting harvest. I have seen the whip scar flesh, but ignite rebellion in the spirit. Chains bind the body, but the soul yearns for the promised land. What if, instead, we forged a garden where the fruit of obedience grows from fear of the divine, not the mortal? Where sin's shadow looms so large, escape becomes blasphemy against one's own redemption." His brother's replies, preserved in that fateful trunk unsealed in 1954 by trembling hands at the Charleston Historical Society, dripped with fraternal caution, laced with scriptural rebuke. "Thomas, you tread on serpents. Genesis warns of the knowledge of good and evil, your efficiency smacks of the serpent's whisper. Men are fallen, yes, but redemption comes through grace, not cunning. Punish the stray sheep as the good book commands, lest your flock devour you." But Vance was deaf to such pleas, his heart hardened like Pharaoh's before the plagues. He saw not brothers in bondage, but mechanisms in a grand, godless machine, or perhaps one ordained by a vengeful creator, where he, Vance, was the appointed executioner. The land he claimed for Willowbrook stretched 1,500 acres, a labyrinth of fertile rice fields bordered by treacherous swamps that swallowed light and hope alike. The Ashley River whispered temptations of freedom, its currents sluggish and serpentine, hiding alligators whose eyes glowed like embers from hell in the twilight. Vance chose this forsaken paradise deliberately, as if mapping the geography of damnation. In his journals, scrawled by candlelight that flickered like uneasy spirits, he noted, "The terrain must mirror the soul's prison, vast yet confining, beautiful yet lethal. The swamps are God's moat, dense with vines that twist like the devil's fingers, pulling wanderers into muddy graves. The forest canopy blocks the stars, reminding all that heaven's gaze is obscured here, and only my watchful eye remains." Construction began under a relentless sun that baked the earth into cracked pottery, the air thick with the tang of sawed timber and sweat-soaked labor. Hired hands from Charleston, rough men with calloused palms and wary glances, hammered beams into place, their mallets echoing like judgments from on high. The main house rose modestly, its whitewashed walls a facade of southern gentility, but its windows were positioned like sentinels, overlooking the fields where rice would sway like penitents in prayer. Yet it was the slave quarters that consumed Vance's fortune and fervor, an architectural abomination disguised as innovation. Imagine the scene, for long barracks formed a hollow square, their wooden frames groaning under the weight of unspoken dread. Each building housed narrow rooms, barely wider than a coffin, with beds of rough-hewn pine that splintered skin like thorns from Christ's crown. Windows gaped open, frameless and uncurtained, allowing the humid breeze to carry whispers from room to room, ensuring no secret could hide in shadow. Doors swung inward to a central courtyard of hard-packed dirt, scorched by the sun, into a barren arena where footsteps left imprints like accusations. No trees offered shade or solace, no structures broke the line of sight. It was a panopticon of the soul, where visibility was the first chain, exposure the eternal whip. At the heart of this infernal square loomed the pit, a circular maw, 20 feet across and 4 feet deep, its brick walls smoothed to a glassy sheen, defying any desperate claw. The floor, iron plates, cold and unyielding at dawn, bolted to a foundation that concealed a subterranean chamber. This hidden hell, accessible only through a narrow tunnel snaking from beyond the courtyard, was designed for coal fires that would lick upward, conducting heat like the fires of Gehenna. Surrounding the pit, an iron fence 3 feet high, its spikes curving inward like demonic talons, invited entry but promised agony on exit. One could step over, drawn by curiosity or command, but retreat meant self-impalement, a biblical echo of the rich man in torment, unable to cross the chasm. Benjamin Cooper, the Freemason of colors summoned from Charleston's bustling docks, etched his unease into private ledgers later donated to posterity. His hands, skilled in stone and mortar, trembled as he laid the bricks under Vance's unyielding scrutiny. This pit, he confided to paper under moonlight, is no mere well or cistern. Mr. Vance calibrates it like a torturer's instrument, timing the heat's rise, measuring the spike's reach. When queried, he speaks of instruction, but his eyes betray a glee akin to Lucifer's fall. I build, yet I sin, for what divine purpose could such a device serve but to mock God's mercy? May the Lord forgive my complicity in this earthly inferno. By winter's chill in 1797, Willowbrook stood complete, its silence broken only by the river's murmur and the distant cry of herons, harbingers of ill omen. Vance dwelled alone, his footsteps echoing in the empty house like a ghost haunting its own creation. Night stretched long, illuminated by lamplight as he pored over maps and measurements, testing acoustics, how a scream would carry across the fields, muffled by fog yet piercing the heart. He timed treks through the perimeter, the swamps sucking mud that clung like guilt, the forest's thorns that tore flesh like penance. In a journal entry stained with wax drippings, he mused, isolation breeds introspection, the land itself preaches sermons of futility. Here, the soul confronts its chains not in iron, but in the mirror of divine abandonment. Escape? To what? A wilderness where God's judgment waits in every shadow. Come February 1798, Vance ventured to Charleston's slave markets, where the air reeked of despair and saltwater, chains clinking like rosary beads in a profane ritual. He moved among the auctions with the precision of a confessor, interviewing prospects not for labor alone, but for the fractures in their spirits. His ledger, a tome of calculated cruelty, profiled each male, approximate 28, robust for fields, eyes dimmed by recent familial severance, grief etches resignation, not rage. Sin's weight bends him, he will toil to evade further divine scourge. Or, female, approximate 22, deft in domestic arts, withdrawn as a penitent in cloister, she averts gaze, knowing attention invites calamity. Her obedience is armor against the abyss, suitable for the flock. 12 souls he selected, a twisted apostolic number, each bearing the scars of prior bondage yet retaining flickers of hope, that fragile ember Vance intended to fan into infernal flame. They arrived in March, shackled not by metal but by the invisible threads of fate, their wagons rumbling over rutted paths that seemed to descend into perdition. Dutch, the enigmatic overseer hired for a princely sum, awaited them, a man of few words, his presence like a spectre, unarmed yet radiating authority as if vested by unholy right. Whence he came, the records whisper not, perhaps a reformed sinner, or one versed in the dark arts of the mind. The initial weeks unfolded in deceptive calm, a false Eden before the fall. Assignments doled out, clearing underbrush where thorns drew blood like stigmata, planting rice in flooded fields that mirrored the soul's murky depths. Meals were portioned fairly, cornbread warmed from communal fires, greens stewed with hints of pork, a mercy masking malice. No lashes fell, no irons bound. The quarter's openness fostered uneasy bonds, women murmuring prayers over wash basins, men sharing tales of lost kin under starless skies. Vance observed from afar, his journal a confessional of cunning, they weave connections, as intended. Brotherhood becomes the noose, sisterhood the shackle. When one sins, all atone, a biblical levy, like Sodom's collective doom. Tension simmered beneath this veneer, a pot nearing boil. In early May, Marcus, the grief-stricken field hand, yielded to temptation. His flight was tentative, a shadow slipping toward the road as the sun dipped low, painting the swamps in blood-red hues. Dutch, ever vigilant like the angel at Eden's gate, retrieved him within hours, the undergrowth's lacerations a foretaste of torment. No immediate reprisal followed, Marcus was tended, his wounds salved with ointments that stung like remorse, fed broth that warmed yet warned. Dawn broke the next morn with a chill that seeped into bones, the courtyard assembling under Dutch's measured summons. The 12 gathered around the pit, its iron fence glinting like Judas silver. Anxiety hung heavy, mingled with the scent of dew-kissed earth and faint coal smoke from the hidden chamber. Vance lurked at the periphery, a distant deity observing his creation. Dutch's voice, calm as a priest's intonation, proclaimed the transgression. Marcus sought the wilderness, defying the covenant. Rules are etched in stone: labor, heed, remain. Breach invites instruction, witnessed by all, for sin ripples like stones in holy water. Marcus, pale with premonition, balked at the command to enter. Silence enveloped them, thick as incense in a cathedral of dread. Vance's notes captured the pivot: coercion breeds martyrs, volition forges accomplices. Let choice damn him. Minutes ticked by, eternity in microcosm, until Marcus queried the cost of defiance. Dutch's reply chilled: refusal starves the flock 3 days, instruction prolongs. Collective penance mirrors the cross: one bears, all suffer. Yielding, Marcus stepped over the spikes, descending into the pit's embrace, his feet kneading cold iron that promised warmth from below. A signal passed, coals ignited in the underworld chamber, flames dancing like demons in revelry. The group waited, breaths held, as heat ascended gradually, imperceptible at first, a whisper of discomfort building to a scream of revelation. This was Vance's genius, or his damnation, not brute force, but a slow-burning hell where the soul confronted its frailty. The pit symbolized the lake of fire, a microcosm of judgment where escape meant self-inflicted wounds, echoing the thorns of Golgotha. As minutes stretched, Marcus shifted, sweat beading like baptismal waters turned profane. The iron warmed, a subtle torment that mirrored guilt's gnaw, not sudden lashes, but insidious erosion. Whimpers escaped, evolving to pleas, as the floor became a griddle of divine retribution. Vance documented reactions meticulously: the women's averted eyes, tears tracing paths like rivers of lament, the men's clenched fists, impotence fueling inner turmoil. They see not punishment, but parable, he wrote. Marcus's agony teaches that flight desecrates the communal bond, inviting God's wrath upon all. Sin's legacy: isolation in torment, where redemption lies in submission. Hours blurred, the heat calibrated to prolong suffering without swift death, a mercy denied, like the rich man's plea for a drop of water. Marcus's cries echoed, bouncing off barracks walls, imprinting on souls like scripture. When finally extracted, blistered and broken, he was nursed back, a living testament, his scars badges of collective caution. Word spread subtly: no further flights tempted fate that year. Vance expanded, purchasing more souls attuned to his criteria, the quarters filling with whispers of the pit's legend. Crops flourished, rice stalks bending like supplicants, profits swelled, a profane blessing. Yet spiritually, Willowbrook festered, a plantation where chains were superfluous, for the shackles were forged in the forge of fear and faith twisted. Visitors rare, but one merchant's letter survived: Willowbrook unnerves, no unrest, yet an aura of haunted peace. Vance speaks of efficient order, but his eyes gleam with messianic fervor. The pit stands sentinel, a silent sermon on sin's inescapability. Decades unfolded thus, 43 years without escape, a miracle of malice. The trunk's documents, unsealed in '54, evoked shudders among researchers, one noting: Vance played God, perverting justice into psychological crucifixion. Biblical echoes abound: the pit is Sheol, collective guilt as original sin. No chains needed when dread of divine abandonment binds tighter. In Willowbrook's legacy, we confront uncomfortable truths: imprisonment's forms transcend physicality, delving into the spirit's depths. Guilt, sin, retribution, themes eternal, haunting us still. What chains bind you, viewer? Reflect, for in Vance's shadow, we see our own potential for darkness, yearning for light. The courtyard at Willowbrook hung heavy with the pre-dawn mist, a veil that blurred the boundaries between earth and the ethereal, as if the veil between the living and the damned had thinned. The 12 souls, shadows in the gray light, shuffled into position around the pit, their breaths visible in the chill, mingling like prayers unspoken. The iron fence encircled the abyss like a crown of thorns, its spikes glinting with dew that dripped like blood from wounds. Marcus stood at the edge, his face a mask of dawning horror, eyes wide as saucers reflecting the first rays of a sun that promised no mercy. The ground beneath was packed dirt, worn smooth by feet that now trembled, and the air carried the faint, acrid scent of coal smoke seeping from the hidden chamber below, a whisper of the inferno to come. Dutch's voice cut through the silence, steady as a judge's gavel, reciting the transgression with the weight of scripture. Marcus sought the forbidden fruit of freedom, tempting fate beyond these borders. In Eden's shadow, such sin demands atonement, not in solitude, but before the congregation. The group shifted uneasily, their simple cotton garments clinging damply, the women's kerchiefs tied tight as if to bind their grief. Vance observed from the main house veranda, a silhouette against the rising light, his journal open on his lap, cool poised like a scalpel dissecting the human condition. Anticipation is the serpent's coil, he inked in precise strokes. Marcus senses the heat's approach, yet ignorance of its fury breeds a terror deeper than pain. Uncertainty is the divine forge, tempering resolve into submission. As the coals kindled below, the iron plates remained deceptively cool at first, a false reprieve that mocked Marcus's hope. He stood rigid, toes curling into the metal that would soon betray him, his calloused feet, hardened from fields flooded with river water that now seemed a distant baptism, beginning to prickle. The sun climbed, casting long shadows across the courtyard like accusatory fingers, and the heat ascended gradually, an insidious tide rising from hell's underbelly. After 40 minutes, the warmth pierced his soles like needles of judgment, prompting a subtle dance, shifting weight from one foot to the other, a futile ritual echoing the Israelites' wanderings in the desert, seeking manna where none existed. The onlookers formed a reluctant choir of the condemned, their faces etched with empathy's etchings. Hannah's eyes brimmed with unshed tears, her hands clasped as if in supplication to an indifferent deity. Peter's jaw clenched, veins bulging like rivers of restrained rage. Ruth averted her gaze to the distant swamps, where cypress knees protruded like skeletal warnings from the muck. The air grew stifling, laced with the metallic tang of heating iron and the sour undercurrent of fierce sweat. Marcus's movements quickened after an hour, a grotesque ballet of agony, lifting one blistered heel, then the other, his breath's ragged gasps that echoed off the barak walls. "Let me out," he pleaded, voice cracking like parched earth, but Dutch stood immutable, a pillar of salt in this modern Sodom. Vance's quill flew, the body rebels, but the spirit witnesses. Note, Hannah weeps openly, she internalizes the communal cross. Peter stares unblinking, defiance simmers, yet fear quells it. The lesson blooms, one's fall from grace burdens the flock, a Levitical echo where sin's stain spreads like leprosy. 90 minutes in, Marcus's cries pierced the morning, raw and primal, his hands grasping the fence only to recoil from its sun-scorched bite. The pit had become a cauldron of retribution, the heat a living entity, coiling around him like the devil's embrace. Blisters bubbled on his feet, skin reddening to the hue of sacrificial flames, and he collapsed to his knees, but the iron offered no cushion, only amplified torment. Tears streamed, mingling with sweat that sizzled faintly on the plates. A soundtrack of suffering that imprinted on every soul present. 6 hours stretched into eternity, a microcosm of Job's trials, where endurance tested faith's limits. Marcus's voice faded from begs to whimpers, then to stoic silence, a resignation that mirrored the crucifixion's quiet agony. When Dutch finally signaled release, Marcus was hauled out, feet charred relics, barely able to hobble on limbs that screamed with every step. The group dispersed in hushed horror, the courtyard emptying like a forsaken temple, leaving only the pit's lingering warmth as a spectral presence. Yet Vance's mercy followed, a paradoxical grace, salves of aloe and herbs applied by Dutch's steady hands, bandages wrapping wounds like shrouds for the reborn. Extra rations, cornbread laced with molasses, green stewed rich, nourished the body, while excused labor allowed reflection in the dim confines of his room. The windows, ever open, framed the pit's silhouette against the sunset, a constant vigil. Vance confided to his journal, severity must scar the memory, yet not shatter the vessel. The flesh mends, but the psyche bears eternal brands. This duality confounds, I am no tyrant of whim, but architect of order, a godlike figure dispensing justice tempered with restoration. They glimpse rationality in the terror, binding them tighter to the covenant. Weeks blurred into routine under skies that alternated between relentless blue and storm-laden gray, the rice fields transforming from muddy plots to emerald seas swaying in the breeze. Work hummed with mechanical precision, hose slicing earth with rhythmic thuds, water sluiced through ditches gurgling like suppressed confessions. But beneath, fractures formed, conversations withered to necessities, eyes darted warily to the pit's maw, movements carried a leaden caution as if every step trod on eggshells of damnation. Vance noted, isolation breeds introspection, the spark of rebellion dims in shared shadows. They police their tongues, lest words summon the fire.
To solidify this unholy edifice, Vance erected a board near the courtyard, weathered oak inscribed with commandments in bold, unyielding script: complete thy labors daily. Venture not beyond boundaries without decree. Assemble at summons. Commit no harm unto kin or chattel. Simple edicts, yet enforced with infernal consistency. Violations invoked the pit's embrace, minor sins, an hour's simmer, grievous ones, a day's descent into Gehenna. And always, the flock bore witness, their presence a collective crucifixion where empathy eroded into numb acceptance. Over 2 years, the ledger tallied 17 invocations, each a sermon in suffering. Hannah's pilfered morsel earned 3 hours, her screams mingling with the scent of scorching skin as the sun arced overhead. Peter's insolent retort to Dutch merited too, his defiance melting into pleas that haunted dreams. Ruth's clandestine creep toward the main house, driven by maternal anguish for her sold-away child, warranted 4, her wails a lamentation echoing Jeremiah's woes. Each assembly reinforced the doctrine: thy sin is our scourge, thy choice, our vigil. The courtyard became a theater of the soul, where privacy dissolved like mist at dawn, and collective guilt forged chains stronger than iron. Interwoven were Vance's compliance metrics, a ledger of the spirit's subjugation, pages devoted to each soul, tracking not just toil but the erosion of self. Work fulfilled, aye. Idle speech, nay. Gaze upon authority, nay. Whispers of autonomy, nay. Autonomy's signs chilled, a hesitated command, a hummed melody amid labor's drone, a chosen path diverging from decree. Rewards dangled publicly, a scrap of calico, a Sabbath's repose under willow shade, paraded like golden calves, stirring envy and self-policing. Vance mused, they become wardens of their brethren, resenting the wayward as threats to harmony. Thus, control inverts, from external lash to internal yoke, a perversion of brotherhood into bondage. By 1800, Willowbrook's 12 had morphed, some automatons, faces blank as unpainted canvas, voices muted echoes, others harbored hidden embers, guarded like sacred relics, a few navigated limbo, bodies compliant while minds wandered forbidden realms. The pit loomed dormant at times, months passing without its roar, yet its shadow permeated, a omnipresent idol demanding obeisance. No escapes tempted, the wilderness beyond, with its thorn-choked paths and alligator-haunted waters, paled against the pit's psychological abyss. Visitors pierced this isolation, their accounts preserved like prophetic scrolls. Gerald Strauss, neighbor and fellow planter, arrived on horseback, dust-cloaked and curious, his diary entry from June 1800 painting a portrait of unease. Vance's yields astound, rice stalks heavy as sinners' burdens, with scant hands. Yet silence reigns where life should pulse, no field hymns, no laughter at dusk, even infants hush as if sensing the pall. He calls it discipline, I name it the grave's hush, where souls linger undead. William Hartford, a Georgian seeker of secrets, toured in 1801, initially awed by the quarter's stark geometry and the pit's grim ingenuity. But immersion soured him, his letter confessed, efficiency gleams, costs plummet sans chains or hounds. Workers move as cogs in a divine machine, eyes downcast, spirits quenched. Query one, and monotone replies fall like dead leaves. Vance beams at this psychological mastery, I shudder at the void where humanity once dwelled, a desecration of God's image. Curiosity spread among planters, some mimicking the pit's form, circular horrors erected on distant fields. Yet failures abounded, the device alone faltered without Vance's symphony, the panopticon's gaze, the witnessing ritual, the metronome of consequences, the curated psyches. Willowbrook thrived as a singular abomination, its architecture a twisted tabernacle where control transcended flesh. Expansion in 1802 brought 10 more, selected for malleable minds scarred by prior chains. The originals indoctrinated them, whispers in the night, heed the board. Shun the spark. The pit awaits the proud. Vance exulted, self-sustenance achieved, they propagate the faith, warnings etched in fear's ink. Among them, Diane, twice fugitive, spirit aflame with rebellion, posed Vance's crucible. A test of tempering, he noted. If the forge quells her, none resist. Diane arrived defiant, her stride purposeful amid the rice paddies slosh, humming defiance under breath, eyes locking with Dutch's in challenge. Queries flowed, why the silence? But responses fled, the group shunned her like a leper, fearing her heresy would summon communal flames. Isolation gnawed, a solitary confinement of the heart.
Her probe at the perimeter, toes testing the tree lean's edge, forest whispering freedoms, triggered reprisal, for hours in the pit, heat coiling like serpents around her resolve.
Post-torment, rage simmered visibly, work done with sullen force.
Yet the structure eroded her, predictability's tide wore down peaks of anger, collective eyes stifled outbursts. Months blurred, fury inverted, devouring inward like a consuming fire. By half-year's end, she mirrored the flock, flat, fused into the whole. Vance reflected, no brute force, the edifice dismantled her ego, guilt's weight-crushing rebellion. Sin's echo, harm to self harms the body of Christ distorted. By 1805, 30 souls toiled under Willowbrook's yoke, harvests bountiful, ledgers plump with profit sans traditional tyrannies. Dutch's shadow sufficed, the pit slumbered, its legend sufficient sentinel. Compliance reigned supreme, birthed not from welts but warped rationality, resistance scorched the communal soul, privacy a myth, hope a heresy. Yet cracks emerged in Vance's paradise, over-yielded obedience birthing inertia. Journals from August 1805 betrayed worry, they await the word for rote tasks, initiative atrophied like unused limbs. I sought submission, not stupor, intelligence must flicker within bounds, lest the machine grind to halt. Tweaks followed, Dutch's commands grew vague, urging improvisation in the field's rhythm, or Rice whispered secrets of growth. But the spiritual toll lingered, a plantation where divine retribution's shadow eclipsed free will, a cautionary psalm on control's cost. In Willowbrook's chronicle, we unearth mirrors to our chains, guilt's forge, sin's shared burden, redemption's elusive dawn. What fires burn in your courtyard, viewer? The pit endures in memory, a chilling testament to humanity's capacity for engineered damnation, pleading for grace's light. The rice fields of Willowbrook lay fallow under a leaden sky in 1806, the stalks bending low as if in perpetual prayer, their golden hues dulled by an unseasonable fog that clung to the earth like the breath of the departed. The air was thick with the earthy scent of turned soil and stagnant river water, a reminder of the Ashley's sluggish flow just beyond the treeline, a boundary no soul dared approach. Thomas Vance paced the veranda of his modest home, boots thudding softly on weathered planks that creaked like confessions under duress. His face, once sharp with ambition, now bore the furrows of doubt, eyes scanning the distant figures in the fields, silhouettes moving with mechanical precision, yet lacking the spark of life that once animated even the most broken laborer. In his journals, preserved like sacred texts in that unearthed trunk, Vance grappled with the unintended fruits of his harvest. The spectrum of souls reveals a flaw in the divine machinery, he wrote, ink smudged by a trembling hand. Some retain cunning within confines, adapting like the serpent in Eden, sly, yet subservient. Others await the word as clay before the potter, inert until molded. Is this variance a testament to God's unequal graces, or my hubris in redesigning his creation? Obedience, once my sacrament, now mocks me with inefficiency. The children, born into this shadowed realm, mirrored the adults' pallor, small forms clad in faded homespun, their games not of chase or laughter, but silent mimicry of toil, pawing imaginary rows in the courtyard dirt. No shouts echoed, only the rustle of leaves and the distant croak of frogs from the swamp, harbingers of stagnation. Sarah's story unfolded that year like a parable of fallen favor, her belly swelling under the coarse fabric of her dress as the summer heat baked the ground into cracked mosaics. The quarters hummed with subdued whispers, rare breaches in the silence, as eyes darted toward Dutch, the overseer whose presence loomed like an avenging angel. Sarah, arrived in 1802 with embers of hope in her gaze, had yielded to his shadow, perhaps seeking protection and submission, a twisted echo of Ruth's gleaning in foreign fields. But Dutch's touch was no covenant, it was dominion, cold and unyielding as the iron pit at the courtyard's heart. When her condition bloomed undeniable, Sarah's despair twisted into defiance, a spark against the void. In the midday glare, amid the slosh of flooded paddies where workers bent like supplicants, she rose, voice cracking the air like thunder over Sinai. Acknowledge this child, Dutch. It's yours by sin or by force. Heads turned slowly, faces etched with dread, the scent of sweat mingling with fear's metallic tang. Dutch's eyes, flat as polished stone, met hers without flicker. No words, only a gesture toward the pit, that circular maw, its spikes curving inward like the thorns of judgment, a symbol of collective crucifixion where one sinner's fall dragged the flock into Gehenna. Vance observed from afar, quill hovering, necessity wars with prudence. Sarah's outburst profanes the order, demanding atonement, yet her womb carries potential, a new vessel for the system. Leniency invites chaos, the serpent's whisper, severity risks divine waste. I compromise at 5 hours, a dilution of justice that sours the soul. The assembly gathered, pregnant bellies and child-clasped hands forming a reluctant circle, the sun beating down like God's unblinking eye. Sarah stepped in, feet meeting warm iron that promised escalation, her hands cradling her swell as if shielding the innocent from inherited sin. The coals ignited below, heat rising like the slow boil of wrath in Proverbs, her cries building from whimpers to wails that pierced the humid air, echoing off baroque walls like lamentations from Lamentations. She endured, blistered but unbroken, the child spared, a girl born 3 moons later under a storm-lashed night, cries muffled as if already schooled in silence. Dutch turned away, paternity a ghost unclaimed, leaving Sarah to raise her in the windowed cell, where the pit's silhouette loomed eternal. This birthed a new layer to Vance's edifice, progeny as perpetuators, souls forged in the crucible from infancy. The children learned obedience not through lashes, but osmosis, absorbing the hush like mother's milk, their play a somber ritual of replication, stacking stones as if building altars to conformity. Vance noted, the second generation embodies redemption's inversion, born without original sin's fire, they lack even the temptation to fall. No Ignic apple beckons, their world is the garden post-exile, barren of choice. Yet this purity troubles, they wander as wraiths, curiosity quenched, mischief unborn. Have I birthed vessels empty of spirit, awaiting only the potter's discard? By 1810, Willowbrook swelled to 43, 28 adults hollowed by years, 15 youths pale as parchment, their eyes downcast like penitents avoiding the divine gaze. Prophets flowed like the Ashley's tides, yields surpassing neighbors with scant oversight, no chains rattling, no hounds baying, only the pit's dormant threat. Yet Vance's journals darkened, ink pooling like blood, success tastes of ashes. The quarters echo with absence, no joy's spark, no sorrow's tear, only resignation's veil. They move as shades in Sheol, laboring without life. Did I, in quelling rebellion, extinguish the breath God blew into Adam? Efficiency's altar demands souls as sacrifice, I offered them unwittingly. Refinements followed, experiments in balance, rewards dangled like manna, extra rations for swift tasks, fabrics woven with rare color, yet the hush deepened. The pit slumbered, and used as internalized terror sufficed. New arrivals, chains fresh from Charleston's markets, entered with flickers of self, a defiant glance, a whispered prayer, only to dim within moons, absorbed like ink into blotting paper. The flock indoctrinated, heed the shadows, spark invites fire. Vance marveled yet mourned, the machine turns without my hand, yet what grinds are not grains, but graces. Gerald Strauss's visits waned, his diary confessing, Willowbrook chills the marrow, a tomb of tranquility where humanity's pulse fades. Vance's triumph is terror, I flee its silence, lest it claim me. By 1820, 23 years unmarked by flight, boundaries untrod, the wilderness beyond a forgotten myth. Workers clung to assigned paths, feet tracing ruts worn deep as scripture, the swamp's vines twisting like forgotten sins. Vance's unease swelled, what stirs within their veiled minds? Do psalms echo unspoken, or has silence slain thought? I dare not probe, lest awakening shatter the fragile order. Productivity ebbs subtly, tasks lingering like unanswered prayers, movements sluggish as if souls weighed by unseen millstones. They pause, tools idle, gazes vacant as the void before creation, he wrote. Dutch's call revives them, but without whip or word, they drift to stillness, a lethargy of the spirit, as if life's flame gutters low. Interventions faltered, shortened days under skies bruised with rain, enriched meals scented with herbs rare as grace, mild stirrings, yet the decline persisted. In 1825, deaths clustered, no fevers flush, no wounds weep, bodies simply ceasing like clocks unwound. The Charleston doctor, coat dusted with road's red clay, examined with furrowed brow, no plague, no poison, a wilting of will, melancholy's harvest where desire dies first. Environmental malediction, Willowbrook's air poisons the soul, echoing Job's cry, why is light given to him who suffers? Vance's letter to his brother, sealed with wax cracked like his resolve, perfection reaps ruin. They perish from resignation's depth, sparkless as clay without breath. I forged obedience, unaware it quenched life's fire. Advise me, brother, how to rekindle without rebellion. The reply, Tirsa's judgment, you sowed wind, reaped whirlwind. Humans defy mechanization, your path led to desolation. No counsel, only prayer for your soul. Alone, Vance dismantled piecemeal, rules loosened like loosened bonds, pit abandoned, its coals cold as forgotten altars. Freedoms proffered, choices in meals, paths in fields, yet met with stasis, eyes blank as unscribed tablets. Conditioning's chains bind tighter than iron, they await command, inert as idols. Children of the 1820s emerged spectral, mute not by defect, but design, imitating silence like shadows mimic form. Vance's attempt to coax speech from a 5-year-old, offering sweets scented with molasses, she stares, uncomprehending, speech a foreign tongue in this babble reversed. Have I birthed a generation soulless, vessels cracked before filling? The 1830s dawned decay, harvests thinned, fields choked with weeds like unrepented sins, deaths multiplying in quiet exodus. Physicians flocked, stethoscopes cold against chests still beating, soul death precedes flesh, hope's absence starves the essence. Restore agency, but decades void may defy revival, like Lazarus, yet unwilling to rise. By mid-decade, Vance conceded, experiments end, obedience perfected, yet incompatible with existence. Erasure of will erodes function, shells labor listlessly, then fade. My system, a false god, demanded total surrender, yielding not paradise, but purgatory. Isolation claimed him, journals his sole confessor, documenting downfall with clinical chill. In 1838, quill faint, proof attained, compliance. Possible, but at humanity's cost. Humans crave spark, agency, will, divine fire. I quenched it for efficiency, birthing hollow husks. Too effective, destructive beyond prophecy. No moral mea culpa, regret pragmatic, a builder lamenting flawed foundation. Willowbrook's legacy, a spiritually chilling testament to control's abyss, where divine retribution manifested not in flames, but fading, a biblical warning that man, playing God, reaps oblivion. What hollows linger in our chains, viewer? Reflect on Vance's shadow, lest it mirror your own. The main house at Willowbrook stood sentinel under a sky-bruised purple with approaching dusk in March 1840, its whitewashed walls now peeling like old skin, the verandas sagging beneath the weight of years and unspoken sins. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of beeswax candles guttering low in the faint, metallic tang of old ink. Thomas Vance lay on his narrow bed, breath shallow as river mist, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams where shadows danced like forgotten accusations. Dutch sat in the corner chair, motionless, a dark silhouette against the dying light filtering through unshuttered windows. No family gathered, no prayers rose. Only the tick of a mantel clock measured the final hours of a man who had spent 4 decades measuring souls. Vance's last journal entry, penned 2 days prior with a hand that trembled like leaves in storm wind, read, I sought the balance between dominion and vitality, the narrow path where obedience blooms without withering the root. I overshot. Total compliance is achievable, sustainability is not. The human spirit, like clay in the kiln, cracks when fired too fiercely. Had I tempered my ambition, but ambition knows no temperance. I proved the theorem. The proof devours the prover. He died alone with his creation's architect beside him, Dutch, the silent enforcer who had become both warden and witness to the slow death of dozens. The will, witnessed by a Charleston notary and sealed with red wax bearing the imprint of a plain ring, directed the sale of Willowbrook and dispersal of proceeds to Marilyn kin Vance had scarcely seen in decades. Most tellingly, it commanded, all journals, ledgers, correspondence, and records pertaining to the management and philosophy of Willowbrook Plantation shall remain together, preserved intact, and deposited with the Charleston Historical Society or equivalent institution. No destruction of evidence. No burning of pages stained with the residue of suffering. Vance wanted posterity to see, not out of remorse, but perhaps out of a lingering pride in craftsmanship, or a need for some cosmic accounting of what he had wrought. The trunk was packed meticulously, bound volumes of observations, compliance charts ruled in precise columns, construction sketches of the pit with measurements down to the inch, bills of sale annotated with psychological profiles, letters to his brother that grew increasingly sparse and strained. July 1840 brought the auction under a merciless sun. Robert Finch, a Charleston merchant with a portfolio of rice and indigo holdings, bid low and won. He arrived in August expecting orderly fields and disciplined labor. What greeted him was a tableau from a fever dream. The courtyard, once hard-packed and vigilant, now sprouted thin weeds between cracked earth. The quarters sagged, roofs leaking memories. 39 souls, adults gaunt as winter branches, children with eyes too large and too empty, stood in perfect formation at the courtyard's center, silent as statues awaiting resurrection that never came.
Finch approached, boots crunching gravel, voice raised in greeting. No heads turned. No eyes lifted. No murmurs stirred. In a letter dated August 10, preserved among estate papers, Finch wrote, "The representation was false.
This is no plantation, it is a mausoleum populated by the living dead.
They stand motionless until commanded, perform only what is explicitly decreed, then cease."
Dutch, the overseer, states they require direction for every breath. "I have seen broken men whipped, branded, separated from kin, but never this utter vacancy.
Their eyes reflect nothing. It is as if the lamp within has been snuffed, leaving only the husk."
Finch spent weeks probing the machinery Vance had built. He replaced Dutch with a whip-cracking overseer from his low-country holdings, expecting familiar rhythms to return. The new man barked orders, cracked leather, threatened sale, or worse. The workers obeyed instantly when spoken to, hoeing rows, mending fences, harvesting what rice remained, but the moment supervision lifted, they froze mid-motion, tools dangling, gazes lost to some interior void. A broken plowshare halted an entire line, no one thought to fetch another.
A flooded ditch went unaddressed until explicitly pointed out. Conversations ceased entirely beyond monosyllabic necessities.
Finch's diary, August 15. "I have stared into abysses before, but never one that stares back with nothing. No spark of defiance, no flicker of sorrow, no ember of hope. They are vessels emptied of self. Whatever sorcery Vance practiced here has left them animate yet absent, breathing corpses in homespun." The pit stood revealed when Dutch, before departing, led Finch to its iron-ringed maw.
The fence spikes still angled inward like accusing fingers, the brick walls gleamed dully, the subterranean chamber smelled faintly of old coal and damp earth. Dutch's explanation was spare, instruction. Witnessed. Consistent. It became unnecessary.
Finch recoiled, diary entry searing, a device of medieval torment, yet unused for years because the terror lives inside them now. The cruelty is not in the burning iron, it is in the knowledge that escape was never truly possible, not from the land, but from the cage Vance forged in their minds. 18 months of feudal stewardship followed. Finch tried everything, reduced hours under forgiving skies, extra rations scented with rare spices, small privileges dangled like bait.
Nothing rekindled.
More faded away, 3 children among them, their passing unmarked by fever or wound, simply a gradual cessation, refusing food though placed before them, sitting motionless until breath stilled.
Physicians summoned from Charleston shook heads, no pathology, a profound melancholy of the spirit. The will to live has been extinguished. By February 1842, Finch surrendered.
One last meager harvest scraped from overgrown fields, then dispersal. The 30-odd survivors sold at Charleston auction, prices slashed to rid himself of the burden. Letters to buyers were terse, sold as found.
No warranties on condition.
Complaints flooded back, workers who stood idle without constant command, who answered in flat monotone, who showed no initiative, no emotion, no humanity. Henry Dover's furious missive, "Your man is useless, a statue that moves only when pushed.
I demand restitution." Finch's reply, caveat emptor. The sale is final. Scattered records trace their fates.
Most withered further in new settings, months or scant years of minimal labor before the same quiet extinction claimed them.
Death certificates listed melancholy, failure to thrive, unknown wasting. Children suffered worst, born into silence, raised without play or wonder, they arrived in new quarters like feral ghosts, mute, unresponsive, developmentally frozen.
One boy's owner wrote in 1845, "He has the shape of childhood but none of its light. No speech, no games, no learning. His mind halted years ago and will not restart."
A handful, newer arrivals who had endured Vance's regime only briefly, showed fragile recovery.
Rachel, 3 years under the system, began to speak in soft bursts to Georgia women, even smiled once, a tentative curve like dawn after endless night.
Her owner noted, "She relearns personhood slowly, as one relearns walking after long illness." The damage is deep, but not absolute.
The land itself lay fallow, reputation spreading like swamp fever, cursed, unlucky, haunted by silence louder than screams.
No buyer came.
In 1847, a timber firm claimed it cheap, ignorant of history. Quarters razed, pit filled with earth and memory, buildings burned or dismantled, pine seedlings planted in regimented rows. Within a decade, forests swallowed all trace, no marker, no plaque, only whispering needles over ground once trod by erased souls.
Yet the trunk endured.
Packed by executors, labeled plainly Vance Plantation Record 1797 to 1840, it moldered in Charleston Historical Society storage until 1954.
Margaret Denton, lead archivist, opened it expecting inventories.
Instead, a chilling chronicle of psychological crucifixion. Her letter to a colleague: "We expected ledgers of commerce. We found blueprints for breaking minds, calibrated, documented, refined like scientific inquiry." Vance wrote of extinguishing consciousness as one might describe crop rotation. The detachment horrifies. These papers belong in restricted vaults, their publication could inspire monsters.
Access remained limited. Psychologists in later decades recognized echoes of learned helplessness, totalitarian conditioning, collective trauma.
Daniel Rosenthal's 1970s paper dissected the principles: witnessed punishment forging shared guilt, privacy's annihilation stifling hope, consistency eroding unpredictability, trauma dosed precisely to scar psyche without crippling labor.
Conclusion: Vance intuited or discovered the architecture of total psychological imprisonment. Effective for decades, it collapsed not from external rebellion but internal implosion.
The mind, compressed beyond endurance, ceases function. His failure was not tactical, but existential. There is a boundary beyond which control destroys what it seeks to command. The paper appeared in an obscure journal, met with unease. Colleagues cautioned, some knowledge is better buried. Rosenthal countered, forgetting invites repetition. Understanding Vance equips us to detect his methods wherever they re-emerge, veiled, modernized, but recognizable. Today the documents rest in climate-controlled vaults, requested rarely. Most historians recoil at summaries alone. The pine forest has matured, suburban edges creep closer. Residents mow lawns, children play, unaware the soil beneath once cradled a laboratory of spiritual annihilation. Yet the story persists in those pages, neat handwriting chronicling theories, doubts, decline. Vance proved a terrible theorem: the cruelest prison requires no bars, only the methodical dismantling of agency, hope, imagination. He showed escape can be rendered inconceivable, freedom unimaginable, humanity erasable while bodies persist. His legacy is not mere cruelty, but proof that such cruelty can be systematized, perfected, sustained until the weight of destroyed souls topples the edifice. Willowbrook asks us still, how many invisible cages operate today: surveilled behaviors, collective consequences, rewarded conformity, punished deviation where the walls are psychological, the wardens subtle, the prisoners complicit in their own confinement? The archives hold no easy answers, only the warning: when we treat persons as problems to optimize rather than bearers of divine image, we risk birthing our own oblivion. The trunk waits. The pages wait. The question waits: what chains bind you that you no longer see?